All right, Cole.
Yeah. What is going on, everyone? It's Cole Jackson here on the Ravens Collective. As you can see, our regular host, Bobby Trossett, is actually out of the country right now. He's up here with me in the Great White North, so they got me hosting this thing. So there's going to be all sorts of technical issues. We're going to go off script here. We're probably going to have a couple rants, but we'll try and keep it as tight as possible for you folks as we go into a special bye-week edition of The Collective. I am joined by my good friend and co-host, Jeff Zrebic of The Athletic. Jeff, we're into the bye week. How much does this team need this damn bye week?
Yeah, I think, first of all, happy Canadian Thanksgiving, Cole.
Thank you. That's why Bobby came up to get more turkey. By the way, we need to have a discussion after. I didn't know we got vacation around here. So, we're going to have a chat about the vacation.
So the Canada Thanksgiving is still the same menu, turkey, stuffing, all that?
It is, but I've learned from you guys because, when I started doing all this and I made all these American friends, we don't take it as seriously as you guys.
Oh, yeah.
You guys are a different breed when it comes to American Thanksgiving.
I go on rants every year about how overrated Thanksgiving food is. Turkey's terrible. None of it. Stuffing I can take or leave, but everything else, nah.
You don't get up here. You don't get mac and cheese. That seems to be a big American Thanksgiving thing. You don't get some of green bean casseroles. I don't usually see up here. It's definitely, there's subtle differences. Ours is way more boring. The only good thing is you get it down in the States too, but it was prime high school football rivalry game. So I'm from Brockville, Ontario, and we used to get the Brockville Bowl, which was the two rival high schools. So it was always a good time going back home for that and getting all the alumni back home. But yeah, no, and to all of our listeners out there, I know there are some of you. Happy Thanksgiving to fellow Canadians, to the Americans out there saying it's not Thanksgiving. Leave me alone.
Yeah, you asked the question before, and at the beginning of the season when the schedule comes out, the first reaction was, wow, that's an early bye. The Ravens won't like that. That prefer the bye more closer to the mid-season or even later in the season where it's it gives them one final opportunity to sort of rest up for the run. But it's hard to imagine a team needing a bye more than this Ravens team needs a bye. They are reeling. We know the 1-5. We know the 4 straight losses. We know all the injuries. They just have to figure it out. The significance of today is I think it's been officially a month since the Ravens have last won a football game. And now you're facing the prospects of coming back off your bye, and you haven't won in a month, but you need to win 2 games in 5 days to save the season. That's pretty much it. We could talk about all this stuff. We could talk about the trade deadline. They need to win 2 games in 5 days, or you can, there's no return. And you can't go 2-6. You can't go 1-7, 1-6. That's it. You need to find a way to beat an improving Chicago Bears team, and then Miami Dolphins, and 5 days later on Thanksgiving, to salvage your season and to even make the trade deadline in terms of adding, matter. So this is a huge week. We heard from the assistant coaches today. We can get into that a little bit. Saw some roster moves today, or not really roster moves, some practice squad stuff. We've seen a couple departures already. I would think there will be different personnel by the next time I watch the Ravens practice. I think you'll have some new guys. I think, trades are possible. I think cuts are possible. I think there's a lot on the table that they're planning. I expect to see some lineup changes probably even next time. Again, we could get into all this, but it's interesting. Harbaugh's keeping them there through Wednesday. Usually he sends them home and gives them most of the week, and he's practicing as much as you're allowed to pretty much during your bye, because there's rules on how much they could be in the building. So I think the sense of urgency is there, but they have to find a way to win a football game, and they haven't done that in a month.
Yeah, I guess in previous years, especially over the last 6-7 years, they've had a reason to give them the day off, and send them home. And we're in uncharted territory. What feels like, I can't remember it. We mentioned it a few episodes ago, but 2015 just keeps coming to mind, where it's the last time that I felt like we were this bad of a football team. And let's jump into the coach. I don't want to go into the coaches too much again, because we've talked about it a few times over the last few weeks. I think everyone's a little exhausted of the conversation. Clearly, the Baltimore Ravens are not making coordinator change. We heard that from John Harbaugh in his presser. They're not going to fire John Harbaugh midseason. They're going to ride it out with the coaching staff they have. But what I did find interesting was, and you mentioned it today, we got to hear from some of the positional coaches, and I feel like we don't usually, unless it's the off season. Back in the preseason, we did hear from Chuck Smith a little bit. So, what was kind of your takeaway hearing from guys like Chuck Smith, George Warhop, those kind of guys?
I don't know if there was clear talking points that they were given by public relations staff or even John Harbaugh. You're right. Assistant coaches don't talk often during the season. Usually they talk in training camp and in the offseason a little bit, but the bye week is traditionally when the Ravens make them available. And, they were stressing the positives. That's for sure. There wasn't a whole lot of finger pointing. There wasn't a whole lot of criticism. They sounded a lot like John Harbaugh did Monday, where we believe we can turn this around. Yes, it's been difficult. We have just the men for the job. And I mean, you heard a lot of stuff today that I know made some Ravens fans raise their eyebrows. There was the George.
I honestly, I laughed reading through because you do the direct quotes, and you're just quoting what you're hearing. But I open up your page and it's like 894 replies, 380. I'm like, Jay-Z's phone's about to blow up in his pocket.
Yeah, there was the beauty of George Warhop saying that Andrew Voorhees and Daniel Faalele have improved every week, and we had T. Martin saying he really thought Cooper Rush played pretty well on Sunday. Chuck Smith saying Tavius Robinson was playing as well as anybody in football at his position when he got hurt, and Malachi Starks exceeding expectations per Chuck Pagano. I mean, they're building these guys up. This group of Ravens have I've heard a lot of negativity, heard a lot of crap. There's a lot of finger pointing in the building. They've heard how much they stink. Players have gotten blamed, and it seems to be coaches are in the mode of let's build these guys up. Let's not make it worse. And I will say to the fans flipping out about it, I get it. It's got to be frustrating, but what's being said to us is not what's being said behind closed doors, right? I think we all have to remember that. These guys, they very much coach these guys hard behind the scenes and are very honest with them about their shortcomings, what they're doing right or wrong. But what they're not going to do is throw them under the bus and pile on to the media. Now, you could also argue about pushback on how effusive they were about some guys who clearly aren't playing that well. But, it is what it is. It's what you take from it. And, this coaching staff has a Herculean task to try to get this team back on track in time. They have zero margin of error, none. You pretty much have to win out in the division. You have to win these next 2 games in 5 days, like we talked about. It seems like absolutely, at the very worst, you have to win 9 out of your final 11 games to be in playoff contention towards the end of the season. And they know that. And they suggest they have just the men for the job, but as they were talking, I'm sure Eric DeCosta in the office above them is working the phones trying to get some help in here, because this is a team that needs some reinforcements too.
Yeah, no, and I found it interesting. They've brought in a few veteran guys that I thought could have made. They seem to always do a good job of getting something out of some of these vets. You think of a guy like Chris Board, who kind of came in and gave them a little bit last year, and we saw them go after Kendricks and try and get him on the practice squad, and he said thanks but no thanks publicly. And then we saw CJ Gardner-Johnson. What was kind of your take on that whole situation?
Yeah, I I know people love names, and we talk about this, Cole, just when we're texting about different situations or talk to other people. And I've been accused of being humorless and not liking fun and all that stuff when I'm negative. When people want to bring in a guy with a big resume who's old in the tooth or who have had issues elsewhere, but I don't know what they expect in situations like this. I really don't. Did they think that Gardner Johnson was going to be happy sitting on the bench, being on the practice squad for a team with one of the worst ranked defenses in the league, a team that's 1-5? I mean, you can't be serious. Like, I get it. First of all, let me be clear on this. This is a no harm move. They signed him in the practice squad. A week later, he's gone. So what? There was no commitment, no anything. It didn't harm anybody. But I just don't know sometimes what they expect. Given this guy's track record, this guy's history, how many teams have given up on this guy because they didn't want him around the locker room. I thought the Ravens locker room as it is a volatile place right now, given all the expectations. People aren't happy. They're not performing. They're sick of losing. There's frustration. Some players aren't getting the ball like they'd like. So you bring in one of the biggest lightning rods in the NFL onto the practice squad. I don't know. Again, I keep saying it, but did you think he was going to be happy sitting on the practice squad for a month and waiting for an opening? It just didn't seem realistic to me. I mean, I think sometimes organizational arrogance can be a good thing. The Ravens believe in what they do and how they do it. But I also think sometimes the arrogance goes a little overboard, where they think every guy that's going to come in there is going to conform to their culture and their well-crafted culture and be happy that they're a Raven and they get to play like a Raven. And I mean, we've seen plenty of times now, more often than not, that doesn't work that way. That for every situation that works out and for every guy that flourishes and changes his reputation while wearing purple, you have guys that are known as malcontents before they get in the building. And guess what? They're a malcontent after they get in the building. That's kind of how it works. It's not like there's a short shelf life, a short track record of these guys behaving in that manner. I mean, there's a reason these guys are on that many teams. And, again, no harm, no foul in the big picture. But like we saw with Deontay Johnson too, it's not for everybody. Not everybody's going to completely buy into some of the stuff you're saying and selling and the culture and all that. And I had my doubts about Gardner Johnson. He deserved an opportunity, but it sure seemed to be a case where they were working on that one a little bit, and they were pretty far down the road and getting that done. And then this trade for Gilman came up kind of really quickly, and like that was done, and they were already too far down the road, Gardner Johnson. So, okay, let's bring in both. But Gardner Johnson was never going to stay on this practice squad for a long time. It's not like this is an undefeated team with the number one ranked defense in the league. So, probably best off to let him move on, avoid any potential distractions, any more volatility than you need, and move on and get the guys on the team that are going to be here for the bye week and start trying to figure this out and weed out some of the negativity and move forward.
Yeah, I got to say, Gilman in his first game, I thought he looked pretty good. He brought a lot of elements to the team that I think they were lacking. Obviously, there's still some very fundamental issues with this football team, but, shout out to Gilman for kind of stepping in and making a bit of a day one impact as that type of dime safety that they wanted. It was interesting. Kyle Hamilton didn't play a single snap as a high safety in this game. They really went with moving Gilman around and Kyle Hamilton back in the box, very much what we were kind of expecting, and Malachi Starks playing that deep role. And I think this is a good segue to jump into I guess the bye week priorities. What do they need to actually get done? Because we look at the pass rush room, it's obviously not getting the job done. Like they didn't they registered, I think, 6 pressures on Sunday, and not one of them was from an edge rusher. Not one edge rusher got a pressure, and that's like, we're talking hurries, right? So barely won a snap.
Yeah, and it's not like the Rams have Anthony Munoz and that's not a great tackle duo either.
No, it's and like they haven't played a whole bunch of great O-lines. Like, I remember going to that Cleveland game, I kept harping on it, being like, if you're going to get going, it's going to be against this Cleveland Browns offensive tackle duo. and we still didn't really get much out of them. So, I mean, I think that's a good place to start, because the question becomes, what do you do if you're the Ravens? Like, let's kind of start a little bit more broadly. Like, with the Ravens where they currently are, how do you really justify making a major move? Now, I think if you make a move and it's a guy like, a younger guy that you're going to extend,
Yeah.
I think that's okay. And that's probably okay use of draft capital. Obviously, there's no shot in hell I'm giving away my first round pick based on what the current record is. I don't even really want to give away my second round pick, because that's usually close to what the Ravens' normal first round pick is.
Exactly.
But, if you can give away a third, sign a guy long term, is that something you would consider? And I'm thinking of a guy like Kayvon Thibodeau, like as a prime. I don't know what he'd fetch in a trade, but is that what you'd kind of look to do?
100%. 100%. I mean, you say, I always say this isn't the baseball trade deadline, because I think some people think they could just, hey, you need a platoon outfielder, you need a starting pitcher, you need a back end reliever, you need a pinch runner for late in games. You can get that all in the baseball trade deadline. The NFL doesn't work that way. There's a salary cap, and you're really kind of hamstring how much you could do with roster space and all that. But the expression is used a lot in baseball about being buyers and sellers. The Ravens are not going to sell at this point. As I said, they need to win these two games. If they win, or if they lose one of these two games, they absolutely should sell. I know fans don't want to hear it. I know they'll talk about, this, you can't do that. You can't give up and this, that, and the other thing, but it just makes sense. However, I think the best case scenario is looking for opportunities that you can add to this current team and get guys that you can have beyond this year. This team is set to have almost 24 free agents, Cole, and a lot of them are starters. They're going to lose a ton of snaps, and a lot of them are starters, and you haven't seen a whole lot of young players that look ready to make huge impacts. I think these guys will get better. I think some of these young players that we're talking about, the Mike Greens and Malachi Starks of the world, and Aeneas Peebles and these guys, I think this experience will be good for them in the long run, but they're going to have a lot of snaps to replace and a lot of holes. And if you could go out now and beat the offseason free agent trade rush and get a guy that you can have for the foreseeable future at a position that you're going to need, I think that's a move you have to make. Otherwise, I'm not a fan of putting in assets right now for short-term fixes when you're 1-5. Now, I could change my mind, and that's the thing here. They have 2 games before the trade deadline. So if you win those 2 and you're sitting at 3-5, right? Yeah, 1-5. Yeah, 3-5. Big game Thursday night. Steelers. Steelers got a really tough stretch coming up. It's they play the Chargers, Colts, and another good team that's escaping me at the moment. So they're going to be tested there. So I think in the next couple of weeks, you'll get a better idea of how far are the Steelers ahead and what's your record. Do we have a chance at this? 3-5, and maybe the Steelers drop one of these games over the next couple of weeks. Okay, and I think then short-term fix makes a little more sense. But if you lose either of these games coming up, no, right? I just don't see how you can make a move. So I think Eric DeCosta is sort of walking that line between, okay, what can we get in the short term that helps us now? Any way you look at it, they need a couple defensive pieces to be ready to play in that Bears game. With Robinson breaking his foot and already some holes on that defense with injured guys, you need to get at least one player, if not 2, that can play for you that Sunday. But in a bigger scale, I don't think you trade for short-term fixes before you know what happens to these 2 games. Now, if it's a conditional 6 or something like that, whatever, that's not a big deal. But I'm talking about a legitimate asset for a short-term fix. I'm just not doing that at 1-5. Maybe at 3-5, yes, but not at 1-5. So that's why this stretch is critical in determining sort of their direction at the trade deadline.
Yeah, and I think if you look at it, if there is, and I'll go back to a guy like I'll use the proper name this time, Brian Burns, not Brian.
There we go.
That was one of those trades where I used to say this about the wide receiver position all the time, and I remember in 2020 harping on trading their first round pick for Stephon Diggs at the time, because I just kept saying, like, we've been trying to fix this position for years, and now they've hit on Zay. Rashad Bateman's been a productive player, so it's a little bit different after the fact. But I just want to see them go out and get a vet and that's proven. And that's kind of how I feel about the edge room right now, because the reality is we're in this situation with the edge room because everyone's focusing on Mike Green. But again, you look at guys like Owe, who he went and he did have a sack, but I mean, he beat a tight end on a bootleg. I don't really know why all these Chargers fans were excited, like they just got the second coming of Julius Peppers. But I've already said, let those Chargers fans get ready for the almost Owe show, because it becomes pretty disappointing pretty quick. And then you look at we're getting nothing from Ojabo. We've got Adisa Isaac hurt again. Like all these guys that just haven't developed into what you expected them to be. Like David Ojabo was supposed to be this souped up pass rush specialist that you could get on third down and doesn't have to worry about the run. He'd just get after the quarterback. And unfortunately, like we just haven't been able to do that. So I have no issue with them going out and trading an asset to get a veteran. Yeah. It does cost you more. You don't get the cheap rookie years. You have to give up a draft pick. I get all of that. But, I kind of look back at the last few drafts and like, this team loves draft picks, and I get why. You get more shots. Eric talks about that all the time when he gets ready for the draft. Obviously we want more comp picks. We get more shots to take. And like logically, I understand it. But, if they have 9 picks instead of 10, I'm not going to fuss too much about it.
Yeah.
Again, I really don't want to necessarily there's no way I'm giving up my first, not when you have a chance to be potentially picking in the top 10. And, I am 100% I'm against tanking. I think that's I think it's a chicken shit attitude to have, to go in and purposely lose games. I think it breeds bad organizations. You should be trying to win every game no matter what. So, quote unquote tanking in a sense of we're going to get rid of all of our players and just play these young guys. That's a little bit different because you're not purposely trying to lose. I think people kind of confuse just being bad with tanking. But, I'm not for doing that, but I would absolutely look at kind of, like you said, not a short-term fix. If I'm adding an edge rusher and it's a guy I'm going to extend on a deal, that's not a move for this year. It's a move for the next 3-4 years, right? No issue with doing that. But I think you got to take a look at, if they lose one of the next 2 games, I don't know how much you'd get. You're probably looking at a late pick, but I'm sure a contender out there would love to have what they see from DeAndre Hopkins. I'm sure someone, might want to add Mark Andrews. Again, you're not going to get a 3rd, 4th round pick. You're probably looking at 5th, 6th, a pick swap later. But it's really about kind of preparing for, moving forward. Maybe you move on from Mark Andrews, give Kolar those snaps. You know what I mean? Like kind of take a look at some different ways of doing that. So I guess all that to say, to kind of summarize, are the Ravens buyers or sellers? You can buy while at the same time making sure that is focused on the next few years rather than and like a guy like I kind of keep going back to it, but like Roquan Smith was a guy that they'd been trying to figure out that inside linebacker position for a few years, and so they went out, they made the premium investment with a 2nd round pick for Roquan. They extend him, they give him a big deal. They kind of solved that through the vet. So that's kind of the approach I'm talking about with the edge rusher position. So is that something that you'd be down for?
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, don't get correct me if I'm wrong, Cole. The Jalen Phillips and Chubb at Dolphins, who are kind of the two of the aren't they free agents? I think. And
so. They were the same draft class as
and isn't Kayvon Thibodeau a free agent as well?
I think he's the year after, so he would have.
So he had one. Okay, yeah, The 2 positions you look for that you could get a piece that could be here for a while is edge rusher and interior defensive lineman. Yeah. And if there's a guy available that, will bolster you big time in the, short term, but also be a long-term piece, that's the ideal trade. I think, the Owe trade, because he clearly had fallen out of favor here, and you get a guy in Gilman that helps you he's a free agent, but he helps you in the short term. and you also got a decent draft pick out of it, right? So I think you can swing that as they did a little of each there, but those trades can be hard to make, and they have so many free agents, and right now they can't get the ball to half these guys. Rashad Bateman's not getting the ball enough. Isaiah Likely's not even involved. DeAndre Hopkins is not playing enough. If you trade one of those guys, are you going to really feel it that much when they're not even involved right now anyway? So, you trade a guy like Hopkins and you get a better look at Devontae Walker, who you need to get a look at anyway, or when he's actually healthy. So, yeah, I think you have to play at both sides of it. Mm-hmm. A lot of people will be watching that Ravens-Bears game and that Ravens-Dolphins game because I really think their direction will become evident. They're not selling. They're not selling any key pieces if they win these next 2 games. Because somebody asked me today, do you really think it's legitimate that they think they could get back into this? And I said, absolutely. They have that much confidence in Lamar. Again, it's that organizational arrogance I talked about earlier. But their schedule lightens up a little bit. I don't think, Steelers have been better than anyone expected, but I don't think anyone expects them to run away and hide in this thing, right? So, they still feel it. But again, that it would be fantasy island if they lose one of these next games to still think that it's worth trading for short-term fixes. But yeah, they have too many needs right now going into the offseason. And if you could check a box with a big piece and get him here for the next couple of years or whatever, and one less thing you have to do in the offseason, that would be a home run for DaCosta. Question is who that is. Yeah, you hear it too. Like, oh, go out and get Jeffrey Simmons. Go out and get Max Crosby. Go out and get Dexter Lawrence. Go out and get Quinnen Williams. And where's the evidence that any of these guys are available? Just because they're on a bad team that's not going to the playoffs does not mean that a superstar player is available. And, Max Crosby has been clear how much he loves Vegas. They've been clear about how much they love him. He's gotten paid. So, you trade big contracts like that. You eat it on the salary cap, these teams that sign these guys. So there's a lot that goes into these kind of trades. And just there's very few of these players available that people think are available. So I think your direction is like what's available, like what can we legitimately get, and the position you'd like to bolster most is not always available at the trade deadline with a legitimate upgrade.
Yeah, I would do some pretty unforgivable things to get Max Crosby my football team. That's all I know. Yeah, before we jump into the second half of our show, let's give a quick shout out to our sponsors. This show is brought to you by our friends at Sleeper.
Sleeper is the #1 fantasy sports app. It pays to know sports. Pick more or less on top players. Your first pick is on us, so start winning now. Play in Texas, Georgia, Minnesota, and 27 more states. Pick anytime across all sports, pregame or live. Over 10 million players are already on Sleeper. Make your picks count. Score up to 1,000 times your cash. Join today. Get up to $100 credit using the code HMA. Call your shot on Sleeper. Download now.
So big thanks to our friends over at Sleeper. If you want to support us, support the show, go over there, use promo code HMA. You'll get a $100 deposit match up to $100. That's a free $100 in your hand using promo code, again, HMA. So as we jump into the second part of our show, let's do a quick check-in. I think we had a couple of comments come in here. So let's throw this one up first. So from Maddie, appreciate you guys and love the pod. If you two were in John Harbaugh or EDC's shoes, what changes would you look to implement over the bye week? I'll take this first because I kind of wanted to pick your brain on this quickly because I was a little surprised to hear some of the comments today, specifically around there could be some changes on the offensive line, and that's really where when I look around at the team, there's only so much you can change, right? Like when people are talking about changing and personnel changes, and like I've said from the start, I think it really comes down to expectations. I know they're not going to be making coaching changes, so I'm not even going to waste my breath going there. But the one spot where I think you could get, and it's just because only 5 guys play unless there's injuries, right? Like you're not rotating offensive linemen in, at least not normally. I mean, the Ravens have done that in the last couple of years, but you got to look, and you look at how much zone they ran last week and the success they had getting Derrick Henry into the second level for the first time in 3 weeks. And I look at that right guard position where, at least last week I can show you plays of Andrew Voorhees taking a step forward in that scheme that I think fits Derrick Henry so well. But then I show you those same plays, and I had a clip up of 11 plays, all of them outside zone, and on 4 of them, Daniel Falele was on the ground. So that's where I would look personally. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, off the top of my head, Matty, few that change. I think the defensive changes that I would make, we saw them to some extent Sunday, right? With Kyle Hamilton placing closer to the line of scrimmage, getting him closer to the ball. I would still be a little more aggressive defensively. I think Roquan Smith and Uwuze coming back after the bye will allow them to do that. Personnel changes offensively, I would replace Falele. I would, we don't watch enough of practice. I would basically treat these couple practices on the bye week and next week as an open tryout between Corey Bullock and Ben Cleveland. And look, this job is yours. Who wants it? And get one of those guys ready to play. Ironically, well, not ironically is not the right word, but I honestly thought as of a couple of weeks ago that Falele was playing better than Voorhees. We talked about this on the show.
Yeah.
So replacing Falele, but yeah, it's just, I just don't see the improvement at all. I think last year we saw improvement through the course of the season. We're not seeing that. I'd also, when we talk about personnel changes, I would stop taking Derrick Henry off the field so much. I don't care about tells and busting trends and all.
3rd and 2. Get Derrick Henry on the goddamn field.
And I love Justice Hill. And I want to say something about Justice Hill. And these blowouts, they're lopsided. This guy's playing his ass off till the final whistle. So it's not about demoting Justice Hill. It's just about highlighting your best player on offense. When Lamar Jackson's not in. So I think Lamar will help a lot. I'd continue with the running stuff that they did last week. And I'd get Henry a couple more touches a game than they've been getting him. I'd keep him off the field. I keep him on the field in just about every situation. I get 2 minutes going away from a little bit, and I make the changes on the offensive line. And that's off the top of my head. I'll probably think of some more stuff as we go along. But Matty, those are probably the personnel changes I'd make.
For the love of God, stop pulling offensive linemen when you're on the goal line. Like I've never. I sent it to my offensive line coach from high school, and I was like, would you guys ever have done this? And he's like, why are you pulling guys when you got eight gaps covered? And I was like, that's what I thought.
Did you see that Henry play, though? Like that, I don't know that a single guy did their job on that 4th and 2 or whatever at the goal line.
Yeah,
that's why I think, and hearing how
you know who did their job on that one? Corey Bullock. Corey Bullock was in as a 6th offensive lineman. It was a trap. So they had Corey Bullock and Noteboom basically down blocking, and what they needed was Voorhees to kick out the edge player, and then Mitchell Payton would be it honestly, it almost set up well, but Voorhees just doesn't get there quick enough because these edge players play downhill against this team so fast.
Yeah.
And that's why, you have to have the feel from what you're seeing throughout this game. It almost looked like they were running wide zone because every single time Byron Young and Jared Verse were setting the edge. And so Derrick Henry just kept cutting the ball back because that's his read. If the head's outside, cut inside. Simple as that. Yeah. And, you have to know that going into that play that they're going to set that edge hard. I can't ask my guard to pull outside of a 6 O-line and expect him to kick him out. It's just not going to happen. But
Brady had a plenty to say about that play call, I think, and, on the call. And, it's just a bunch of Ravens offensive linemen on the ground, but I think the Lamar running threat will help, getting him back as a running threat. I think Ricard coming back will help. So, there's things to look forward to offensively to suggest that they could take a huge jump here. But how many chances are you going to give Lele and to a lesser extent Voorhees? I think you got to start looking. You got to give someone an opportunity to seize that job.
Agreed. And then we have another one here from Nick. So Jeff, I think we can make a run, but I also don't mind sucking enough to where we get Ruben Bain. I want a guy that can set the edge and make a difference.
Badly need an edge rusher that keeps offensive coordinators up at night, that teams have to game plan for, that teams have to double at all times, that when the Ravens need to get off the field in a key spot, they have a guy who can get a strip sack. I mean, how many times has been done to them by TJ Watt or Highsmith or Ed? Just guys that just can ruin and wreck the game. They've had some good edge rushers, but they haven't had that guy, and they've swung and missed a lot at that position in the draft. They've gotten some decent, but they haven't gotten anything great, and they're paying for it now. I just, not to have a quarterback hurry or whatever pressure from your edge rush group is that's an insane stat.
It's absurd. It makes me sick to my stomach.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you, and I've seen him play a little bit. I've already heard a ton. They're going to have to lose a lot of games to be in position to draft him. That's for sure.
Well, did you know if the draft was today, the Baltimore Ravens would be picking 2nd overall?
Yeah, I mean, there's that website Tankathon.
Yeah.
And I always joke around with like my friend who's a Jets reporter and the Cleveland Browns guys, and they're eyeing that website and refreshing it after every game from week 10 on. And that's something I've never even looked at in terms of where the Ravens are. But if this keeps going this way, I'm gonna have to familiarize myself with it.
Yeah, and the last time, again, I'll keep drawing the parallels. The last time that they picked that high was the 2016 NFL draft after that 2015 season, and they got Ronnie Stanley, who, without that ankle injury was basically, well, I mean, he still is a franchise left tackle, so you can really get those premium positions that they struggled to fill that left tackle spot after the Super Bowl for a few years. They took shots at a guy like Eugene Monroe, and so it can... it sucks. No one wants to lose games, but if this is kind of that reload year and they do end up with a top 5 pick, you get a difference maker like that. And then Nick had one more, just mentioned Christian Wilkins is available. I don't know if they want that freaky dude in there.
Yeah, I mean, I've asked around about him just because everyone talks about him, and I was told not healthy and baggage, and that's not a good combination at this time of year. And I'm not defending the Ravens here, but it's October 14th and he is unsigned. It's been a long time since he played football, and sometimes there is a reason a guy like that is unsigned, and it's usually falls around health and off the field, and I think at least definitely health has been the case with him.
Yeah, makes sense. And I don't have the direct. I want to jump into some health updates. I don't have the direct quote from John Harbaugh in front of me right now, but he certainly made it sound like Lamar Jackson's back, and I think I saw a couple fans out there that they're not even questioning whether or not Lamar Jackson's going to be at quarterback after the bye week. Like, what's kind of your take on that?
Yeah, I think it's a we'll see. I think they're hopeful. I think given the nature of his hamstring injury, they expect him to be back. I think Lamar's planning to be back, but it's a hamstring. You need to go out there and practice. You need to go out there and have a good practice and not have any setbacks and not feel any tweaks, because if you tweak it again, you're back at square one. So, I think that's the plan, Cole, to have him back, but you can't say for sure. It's too early to say for sure. And they need him to get through a practice week and be healthy and not have any recurrences of it to feel confident that he's going to play.
Yeah, it was just one of those things where I read the quote and then I was like, he's got a hamstring injury. I'm just not sure it was his 100. And like, I don't know. You're 1-5. Lamar Jackson's your franchise quarterback. Do you want him rushing back and playing, at less than 100%? I don't really know, especially behind this offensive line where, his saving grace has always been that, he can improvise and be a playmaker, like no one we've ever seen before. And, that includes him escaping pressure. And he had to do that plenty before the injury. So, I'm just not sure if I want him rushing back if he's not 100%.
I also like to say if he's not ready to go, I'd have a hard time believing we're going to see Cooper Rush start that game. The frustration of those guys was palpable on the field. And, I don't know. It was a weird fit from the beginning. I thought Cooper Rush was better when I watched him in Dallas. I'm not talking about upper echelon backup quarterback, but I thought he would be fine. I thought he was a legitimate upgrade over Josh Johnson, but he struggled, and it's just been a kind of a weird vibe with him in the locker room. And, I don't think you could start him. against the Bears if Lamar. I think you have to go to Tyler Huntley. You just have to. And look, Tyler Huntley is going to create some issues too. He got sacked 5 times in 24 snaps or 25 snaps, and some of those he just held on to the ball, which you can't do behind this offensive line. We know the results. So, but yeah, John Harbaugh's response about Cooper Rush was quite interesting. He wanted to make everybody clear that everybody realized that Cooper Rush knew the plan was to play both of them. Cooper Rush had said he was surprised by it, but Harbaugh kind of pushed back on that, said he knew the plan, and he wouldn't even really was non-committal. He mentioned he has to talk to Eric DeCosta about roster stuff. I wouldn't think you can make a move with Rush until you know Lamar Jackson's healthy. So I'm not sure I see anything imminent there, but man, I would be surprised if he starts if Lamar Jackson's not able to.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, Tyler Huntley has that added advantage that he can run still. Yeah. And so you can be a little bit more deceptive in your run game. You can create a little bit of that extra read at the mesh point. All the advantages that Lamar Jackson gives you. Obviously, Huntley isn't the athlete that Lamar is, but, there's something to be said about your backup quarterback having that mobility and that run ability. It just gives something, of substance, because usually pocket passing backup quarterbacks are backup quarterbacks for a reason. So they're only going to give you that lesser play in the air and give you that was a hell of a scramble by Cooper Rush there. He almost got that first down. But, I'd much prefer to have that kind of rushing upside of Tyler Huntley.
I also think there's more of a belief in him, Cole. You could tell. You could look at the body language and, he's close with Zay Flowers, and he knows a lot of these guys from, this is his 3rd stint with the Ravens. And, he's thrown the ball to Mark Andrews before, and he knows these guys. And a lot of these guys, so he's friends with and he's close with. And I just think there's a little more belief in him among the other players in the locker room. And that's not a shot against Rush. He just doesn't have the rapport with this team because he just got here, 6-7 months ago. And, and I think obviously everyone knows how close Huntley and Lamar are too. And I think that kind of permeates through some stuff. It just gives him a little more chances to make big plays and to get out of bad ones with his athleticism.
I still think they should make a move for Jameis Winston, because at the very least, you're going to get some funny quotes. So maybe that'll be just what turns the locker room around and creates the good vibes. You just bring him in first string, good vibe police.
Oh, yeah, that would be fun. I would enjoy that.
Yeah, he'd be a media darling. And then we got some other guys that have kind of been working back. What's your expectation for Pat Ricard to be back?
Another, again, also very telling by John Harbaugh. I made it clear that, look, it's up to him. So that tells us.
We've heard the up to him before. And
exactly.
The up to him is my favorite, because that is him clearly saying that based on whatever they're getting, that he should be playing, but it's up to him.
He's been cleared, yes. Yeah. So, man, I don't want to be skeptical about Patrick Ricard. I mean, this guy has been nothing but a pro and a selfless teammate, and just kind of one of their biggest badasses they've had on this team for many years. So it's just been an unfortunate injury, and it's been kind of one thing after the next. And man, that's been a surprise to them. They expected him to be playing a while ago, so he's obviously been cleared, I think, at this point. So it's up to Patrick, but I would be surprised if we don't see him out there. I mean, he was practicing all last week, not in full, but he's not going to be a guy that plays a ton of snaps anyway, really. But their running game would look so much, especially in short yardage situations, getting him back. I think
Forcer, right? Like he has that impact that a power forward does, or a big man on the wing in hockey. Like it makes it. He's got an intimidation factor to him.
Yeah. A little Matt Rempe. Matt Rempe?
Yeah. Rempe's my kind of guy.
Yeah, sure is.
Rempe just has to make sure he lines someone up right, because either he's going to decapitate them or lay that hard check to the chest.
He's playing pretty good hockey this year, though. They're using him on the second power play, which is a big guy
to stand in front of the net.
Exactly. Yeah.
The Sens used to do that with Chris Neal all the time. Just they weren't getting him out there for his hands, but just go stand in front of the goalie. And then, a couple other guys, Roquan and Wouzier, we expecting both. I think you tweeted they were both working on a side field.
Yeah, Wouzier looked like he was further ahead. Wouzier was doing sprints and looked pretty good. So I think we'll see him for sure. Again, with hamstrings, you never know, as long as he gets through practice. But they fully expect to have Roquan back this coming week too. If you're running on the field and this was, he's going to have some time to take the next step. That's another guy. He wants to be out there. I don't think he minds playing through a little discomfort, but hamstrings are tough. So, yeah, that's the way I look at it, Cole. And that's what makes some of their roster decisions interesting.
And
you need go ahead.
No, I want to jump into Emory Jones because that's a guy that I wouldn't say, maybe I don't really recall them kind of giving direct updates on like what a player return. You know what I mean? Like they kind of were like, he's not doing pass pro. And then today they were like, he's doing pass pro. I
didn't like what I heard today about what George Warhol was saying.
Was that not super strange? Like I read that and I was like, is there not a real chance this guy doesn't come back?
It was different than what Harbaugh said on Monday. Harbaugh said, like, look, we're pushing the envelope with him. Like, we're trying to get him ready as fast as I can. Warhop was, and maybe that's just not wanting to create expectations for the kid, right? So, look, we got to remember where he's at too. It's not like he had the surgery after training camp. I mean, he's literally gone through 7 practices with the team, and that's since an NFL player. That's just not 7 regular season practices. That's 7 practices, period.
Yeah.
So, but look, it'll be interesting what they do. I think the window is 21 days. So I think it's a week from tomorrow, or it's middle next week.
Yeah.
They'll have to have him to the 53-man. But there's very realistically a scenario where they add him and he's just inactive a couple weeks as he.
Yeah, there's no way he's going to be starting.
No,
and again, the offensive line's weird like that, where you're not going to rotate guys in. Like maybe you do see that rotation, but we haven't even seen what position they see him as, right? Like, they still list him. I know it's always hard to tell what the official roster says, but he's listed on the official roster as an offensive tackle, and that's. When he played at LSU, and I've made the case pretty clear that I think he's an NFL level guard. But does the team see it that way? So that would be kind of, and I mean, it does kind of matter because if Ronnie Stanley isn't right, he left the game again on Sunday, and credit to Ronnie for trying to play through it. He doesn't look right, and he hasn't for a couple weeks, but there is that possibility that a potential move would be to flip Roger Rosengard to left tackle and then insert Emory Jones at right tackle. But I got to say, like, I don't know if that's your best setup right now. Like, but at the same time, Noteboom's been so poor in pass pro that maybe it is. Like, I mean, it just really shows where they're at on the offensive line and how, things just aren't panning out.
Yeah, I think, totally. And I mean, could we get a scenario where Faalele goes from starter to inactive pretty soon?
I'd love to go to that scenario.
But yeah, just overall, I think you look at it, and best case scenario after the bye is you get a much healthier Ronnie Stanley, you get Lamar Jackson, you get Patrick Ricard, you get Owuze, and you get Roquan Smith, and maybe Eric brings in a player or two, and you could have as many as 6, 7 guys. I don't want to say new guys because most of those guys have already been on the team, but 6 or 7 guys that you haven't had in recent weeks. And, people want to say, well, why is there hope? Like, are they kidding themselves? That's why there's hope. They could look like a drastically different team in 10 days or however long that Bears game is away.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess we'll wrap up on this. We will kind of keep her a little shorter. Contract extensions, always a possibility that gets done during the bye week. There's a week off. Well, I mean, not in Baltimore apparently, but they don't have a game to prepare for on Sunday. So really there's kind of 3 guys that I think would be kind of in that next lineup for extensions. First and obvious one being Lamar Jackson. I don't even know if it's worth talking about. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see a chance in hell that he does a contract extension before the offseason.
No, that would be pretty shocking if that gets done at this
point.
So
we won't even there's not even value in discussing it.
I will say they shouldn't let him leave the building after the season. Eric DeCosta should make him sit with him, because if that cap number is hovering over their entire offseason, it's going to be awfully tough to build a roster around him. That has to be priority number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's going to be tough to do anything meaningful if he's on the cap for over $70 million.
Yeah, it's got to, and they need to learn from the Mike McDonald thing, like lock him in the basement, tie him to a chair, like learn your lesson. But the two guys that are up for extensions are Tyler Linderbaum and Travis Jones. And Travis Jones, mostly because of injury, just hasn't really been on the field as much, and he's working back from injury. But Tyler Linderbaum, as much as, again, he's one of my favorite Ravens. I'm not here to try and talk bad about him, but his play has not been as good as it has been in the previous 3 years. So, how much does that hurt a contract extension possibility? Because, they're not doing the 5th year because of the offensive line tag, which makes sense. So you need to figure out what to do with Linderbaum. You spent a 1st-round pick on a center. It was seen as, that premium investment. It's one of those draft picks that you're sure hoping that you get a second contract out of because of what you put into it draft capital wise. So, how would you kind of manage Tyler Linderbaum's contract?
Yeah, I would try to sign him. And I know there's concern because he hasn't played that well. And that has been, what do you attribute it to? He has had injuries, and that's one guy that doesn't complain. He has a calf injury. He didn't miss a practice. He left early in one practice. That was the extent of it.
You don't miss practices in Iowa.
Yeah. The dude's playing through some stuff, and and then you got the contract. Is that on his mind? And then you got the fact that, I'm sure in his mind, he has to feel like he's covering some for the two guys that lining up around him who've struggled all season. So, but man, I would have a tough time letting him walk, because again, then you have another hole on an offensive line where you need to add to anyway. And I know the hope was you get a deal done, but if not, maybe if you could fit it in, you franchise and push the cart down, just delay the decision by a year. But I think they really, I don't think what they've seen from Linderbaum this year will make them apprehensive about signing him to extension. My understanding is he's still a guy they want to keep around. But you look at the group, Cole, and this isn't Lamar. This is like we're talking about pending unrestricted free agents, and who has helped their cause. Look, some of these guys are going to get signed regardless. Like if Linderbaum, it gets the open market, he'll be signed 30 seconds into the window. Yeah. But Travis Jones has kind of been a disappointment. And again, is it he doesn't have any help, and he up there, and he's also battling a knee. Probably something to do with it, but I think
he's also a guy that's had injury the last 2 years.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like he got hurt last year.
I thought most people thought, me included, it would be a breakout year. I have to wonder where Isaiah Likely's at. The Ravens were willing to pay him an awful lot of money, not top 5 tight end money, but they're willing to pay him a good amount of money to extend him this offseason. It wasn't enough. He wanted more, and that's fine. That's his right. But now he's going to go through the season where he was injured. I think that's a setback. I don't think he's 100%, credit to him, but he's not really involved in the offense at this point. And, so Mark Andrews is another one. He started to be more active and make some plays, but it's tough. Like, who has really helped their cause this year among their pending free agents? I don't know if there is a guy that you can really point to that says, wow, like he's having a really nice salary push. Again, we're early. That all changes if with some of these guys. But you look at it. Ricard's another one. He's a free agent. The list goes on and on. So that's an interesting dynamic here. But I think the guys that they would love to sign are Linderbaum, Likely, and Jones. Those are the 3 guys that stand out to me as guys that they would really like to get done. But there's going to be some people they have to let go. Eric Costa's been upfront about that. And this season could feature more change than anyone imagined if they continue to go down this road.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And, I do feel for Linderbaum, because I also don't think, I've spent a lot of time trying to form an opinion on it, because I've always been very upfront about this. It's really hard to judge positional coaches. Like I don't know what they focus on in practice. Like I don't have that line of sight into kind of that piece. But when I look at the offensive line and I see basically every player regress, I have a lot of questions about George Warhop. And so you look at Linderbaum, he's a questionable offensive line coach, questions at guard around him. They haven't had an identity in the run in their run scheme. They also aren't really helping them in pass pro the way you kind of saw it when Kevin Zeitler was there. So, I think he's playing in a situation where he's kind of just got everything stacked against him. So you got to kind of factor that in. But, there's still reps he loses one-on-one, and he has to own that. So, I do expect them to keep Tyler around. I think if I had to decide between Tyler Linderbaum and Travis Jones, and that's a tough decision because – if Matabike is going to be out an extended period of time, you're going into the offseason, you might have to rebuild your entire defensive line.
Because I don't think Broderick Washington's going to be back at this point, right?
Yeah, no, definitely not.
And Peebles, they clearly don't see as an early down guy. John Harbaugh's made that clear. You're right. One thing I want to say about Linderbaum, I think in general we've talked about this. I think Bobby asked me about this. I in generally don't think really fans care about this kind of stuff. So I'm not one of these guys that whines about, hey, this guy slipped out of the locker room without talking. Now, I wish it wouldn't happen, but it's going to happen. And I know that was the talk this weekend when Zay Flowers wasn't around. There weren't many guys around to talk to the media, even a guy like Kyle Hamilton, who's always there, always been there. But without fail, Tyler Linderbaum is always available. Always willing to talk, and never points fingers, never is negative to anybody, never reacts poorly to a question. Dude is a consummate pro. Probably no probably about it. He was our good guy in the media last year, and we don't do runner-up. We don't do back-to-back winners. We spread the wealth a little bit, but he'd be the clear favorite to win going away again this year. He has been willing every time after every disappointing loss to stand up there and take it and at least try to be respectful about it. So, yeah, I think Tyler Linderbaum is the least of their concerns. I agree. He's not playing as well, but I think there's some extenuating circumstances there, and you can't talk all this about him being a Raven and looking at certain qualities and see, coveting certain guys for their characteristics and let a guy like Tyler Linderbaum walk out the door like it's nothing.
He's one of the few guys that I think still embodies what play like a Raven, and I think they need to rebuild that. So, I just said that comment about rebuilding the D-line. I don't know if that's a bad thing right now. I kind of had this conversation a few times where, you look at the draft picks the Ravens have made over the last 5-6 years. A lot of guys that, are a little smaller in stature, a lot of guys that are lighter, a lot of guys that are a bit more speed focused, not so much physicality. So did we lose a little bit of what play like a Raven meant with that kind of draft approach? I think it begs a question.
It does. And what's interesting, when the team's struggling and I listen to what people are saying in the building, but I try to talk to people who are pretty familiar with this team, whether they're coaches elsewhere, executives elsewhere that know him well, people that I've gotten to know over the years from them being here, just seeing in different places. And I've gotten that quite a bit. They just do not have the physicality on offense like they used to.
Is that why they struggle in the postseason?
Yeah, like they've tried to get finesse. They've gotten a little finesse offensively, and they just haven't had that. They're just not this physically bruising offense. Now, you say that, and they led the league in rushing last year and all that. I think there's examples of it. But I don't think you can say over these first 6 games that they're playing offensively with the physicality that they need to play with. I think, and that's why the 3-play sequence at the goal line against the Rams is sort of a microcosm of the first 6 games. I mean, you look at that play, look who's getting pushed back, and that's not hitting anybody in the mouth. It's the opposite. So that's interesting. You talk about that, about the finesse, and have they gone too finesse and lost a little? Physicality?
They had the opportunity to draft a 6'4" freak demon in DK Metcalf, and they picked a guy that's 5'4" and Marquise Brown. I'm not trying to disrespect Marquise Brown, but based on what the offensive style was under Greg Roman, how the hell do you not pick DK Metcalf? Like it's just there's example and example again. And Zay is smaller. I will say Zay has that tougher attitude. So I do appreciate that one. But even Rashad Bateman, he's a little taller, but he's slender. You look at Malachi Starks, slender. Like they're just a slender, they look like the Slenderman walking through the woods. Like it's just, I know I have the physicality bias. And even if you look at their offensive line picks, Tyler Linderbaum, known as a small guy, Roger Brosengart, small guy, need to build functional strength. It's just, you look through first 3-round picks over and over again. Ironically enough, the offensive line I have the biggest problem with is 6'8", 370 pounds. Now he does play he plays like he's 6'2", 3 or 180, but whatever.
You had to get one last shot in.
One last. So listen, folks, we are an hour into this. We will be wrapping up. There's 406 of you joining us for this bye-week primer. Do me a favor, hit the like button, hit subscribe if you're new here to the channel. We come to you every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. I didn't butcher anything too bad, so that's a big shout out to me. I'll pat myself on the back there. But Jay-Z, my guy, have a good bye week. I hope you get to enjoy your weekend, not having to watch this football team, as sad as that sounds. I know I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I walked out of that facility today and I'm going to enjoy a couple of days. It's only been, well, you say only, and it goes back to training camp being there every day. But yeah, I think everybody needs a little bit of a break. And, the team that's going to be on the practice field next Wednesday, that's more representative of the kind of lineup they want to have. And, look, the season is a two games in 5 days. That's all they need to look at. And if they don't get it done, there's no coming back from 1-6 or 2-6 even. So it'll be interesting. We'll know a lot more about this team in 2 weeks.
Love it. And as always, be good to yourselves, be good to each other. Peace out, everyone.